Hey there, bikers! Welcome to another episode of.
I think I got something in my throat. Anyways, after the disaster that was the Pyro Melee video, it all comes back to TC2. So here we are, another balance changes video, today starring the big guy himself. Heavy as a class is one I admittedly don't play a lot of. He's pretty situational and his weapons don't provide a lot of variety. That said, that also means that he's a lot more straightforward than other classes, which means his changes are also fairly straightforward. Anyways, let's start. To start us off, we have the Brass Beast, renamed the Biker's Blitz in TC2. The Brass Beast is largely considered one of Heavy's worst weapons. The upsides are that it deals 20% more damage and grants a 20% damage resistance, while spun up and below 50% health. The downsides are that you spin up 50% slower and move 60% slower while spun up. The damage bonus might sound dandy, but we all know that any other minigun already deals hundreds of damage per second from mid to close range. But not only that, the Brass Beast makes it harder for you to deal that damage. The half a second slower spin up time makes spinning up much larger of an investment, and the slower movement speed while spun up makes it impossible for you to chase after enemies. And trust me, the 20% damage resistance really isn't helping you when you're at 150 health and moving around at a snail's pace. It's very easy for enemies to punish you while you're spinning up or to run away while you're firing, making this one of Heavy's weaker miniguns. The Biker's Blitz kinda carries a lot of that Brass Beast DNA over. The upsides are that it deals 15% more damage, fires 10% faster, and grants a 15% damage resistance while spun up. The downsides are that you spin up 33% slower and move 75% slower while spun up. This still has the same problems as the Brass Beast. It's still a huge investment to spin the Biker's Blitz up. It still makes you extremely slow while spun up. Its damage and firing speed bonus are still redundant compared to the other miniguns. The damage resistance while spun up is nice, but with that slow of a movement speed, you'll find yourself being focused even more than usual. I also like the approach of making it spin up faster, but these changes really don't help the Brass Beast perform any better. Then we have the Tomislav, under the same name in TC2. In TF2, the Tomislav is widely considered Heavy's best minigun. The upsides are that you spin up 20% faster, are 20% more accurate, and also have no barrel spin sound. The downsides are that you fire 20% slower. A faster spin up time lets you react to things faster. More accuracy lets you pin down targets from further away. No barrel sound lets you stay revved around corners without others hearing you. And this is all for a slight decrease in firing speed, which still results in hundreds of damage per second. Yeah, it's easy to see why the Tomislav is considered the minigun on top. Now, the Tomislav in TC2 has the same upsides as its TF2 counterpart, but changes the downsides to a 25% slower firing speed and a 25% decrease in primary reserve ammo, bringing Heavy's reserve from 200 down to 150. The firing speed was only changed by 5%, and the ammo penalty doesn't feel like that big of a deal either. You can usually collect enough ammo between fights to sustain yourself, even if managing ammo is kind of a chore. Also, I can't really verify this, but it feels like the Tomislav is less satisfying in TC2. It feels less accurate and less rewarding, although maybe it's just the weapon model and animations. But at the end of the day, it's still the TF2 Tomislav, but you have to manage your ammo a bit more. The nerfs don't change much, but lowers its status just enough that the other miniguns have a chance to shine now, so I guess it's fine. Bringing us into the secondaries, the first one we have is the Delocos Bar, renamed the Robar in TC2. In TF2, the Delocos Bar is a Lunchbox item that heals up to 100 health upon consumption and also adds 50 max health for 30 seconds. This extra health lasts 30 seconds and does not stack with the Medic's overheal. You can also share it with a teammate, where it comes out as a small health pack. It recharges in 10 seconds, whereas the Sandwich usually recharges in 30. What makes the Delocos Bar worse than something like the Sandwich or Second Banana is just that its effects aren't felt as much. 4 seconds taunting is a long time, and getting 50 health before a fight or 100 health after one isn't usually enough as Heavy, so this weapon comes off as underwhelming. In TC2, the Robar acts completely different to its TF2 counterpart. In fact, when writing this script, I was originally using the Spec Ops Sushi because of how different TC2's chocolate was compared to TF2's. But anyways, upon consumption, the Robar provides no healing, but instead provides a 10-second buff that restores 33% of damage dealt his health and heals 20 health per second. This buff actually starts the moment you eat it, so it's closer to a 6-second buff. It still drops as a small health kit and recharges in 10 seconds. Despite the complete overhaul, I think the row bar still comes off as underwhelming. You have to use this before a fight to get any benefit, and with heavy, those fights are either too sudden or too damaging to get use out of the health restore. And this is also ignoring the fact that if you have a medic at all, this weapon is completely pointless. Outside of that, it also heals you and your teammates less effectively compared to the sandwich. A nice attempt at a change, but it's still mediocre. Moving on, we have the Buffalo Steak Sandwich, renamed the Tenacious Turkey in TC2. The steak sandwich in TF2 takes a rather unique approach with its gimmick. Upon consumption, it does not heal, but instead forces heavy into melee only for 16 seconds. During this time, the heavy moves 30% faster, deals mini crits, and also takes 20% more damage. You can still share this to teammates, where it comes out as a medium health pack. I know it's supposed to be a funny meme weapon, but even in that regard it's bad. You move barely faster than an engineer and can only deal damage via melee. You also take 20% more damage too. It's not worth it if you're playing seriously, and it's pretty mediocre if you're goofing around as well. The Tenacious Turkey acts quite similarly to TF2 Steak with some slight changes. The effect lasts 10 seconds instead of 16 seconds. It charges in 15 seconds instead of 30 seconds. You now move 35% faster instead of 30% and also take no push force while the effect is active. Additionally, if you don't kill anyone after the effect ends, you're slowed down by 15% for 5 full seconds. To be honest, I think the Turkey is only saved by the fact that Heavy's aggressive melees were buffed in TC2. It carries over many of the downsides of the TF2 Steak, including the melee lock and the vulnerability, but on top of that adds a slowdown that almost guarantees your death if you don't get a lucky kill. I like the faster recharge rate, but things like the vulnerability and slowdown are kinda puzzling, and I'm not a fan of the concept by itself, but in practice you'll get use out of it with his other weapons. Starting with melees now, our first change are to the stock fists. The main changes from TF2 to TC2 are that you switch weapons 25% faster, reload shotguns 20% faster, and also throw your lunchbox items slightly further. The faster switch speed changes like 0.1 seconds, so you're not getting much out of it. With the lunchbox throwing stat, you're usually going to be throwing your sandwich to your pocket and he's probably pretty close to you. In the off chance you're tossing this to another teammate, it's a 50-50 whether they'll even notice you throwing your sandwich. So outside of Fat Scout, there's no real reason to use this. I guess they did give it a purpose, as situational as it is? Second on the melee list are the Gloves of Running Urgently, changed into the iconic speed coil in TC2. TF2's Gru is pretty much the best melee Heavy has. The only upside is that you move 30% faster while this is active, while the downsides are that this weapon holsters 50% slower and also drains max health at a rate of 10 health per second, although it does restore this health back after switching weapons. Moving as fast as an engineer for the small cost of having to think about when to put this away is huge for a class as slow as Heavy, so it's easy to see why this is such a good melee. The speed coil in TC2 still grants a 30% movement speed bonus and 50% slower holster speed, but instead of draining health you're marked for death while this is active and for a short while of putting it away. While this might just seem like the pre-jungle Inferno Gru, it's important to note that marked for death in TC2 shows your location to everyone on the map. This sort of ruins any sneaky plays you could have done, so it's debatable how much of a buff or nerf these changes are, since you don't need to think as much when to put it away, but you also can't use this for melee combat or flanking. It's still great for letting Heavy get to the front line, so its viability hasn't changed much. Next up is the Eviction Notice, under the same name in TC2. The Eviction Notice in TF2 is a pretty garbage weapon. You move 15% faster while this is active, fire 40% faster, and also gain a 3-second speed boost on hit. On the downside, this deals only 26 damage and also drains max health at a rate of 5 health per second. If you want a weapon that brings you to the battlefield faster, this is outclassed by the Gru. If you want a weapon that aids you in melee combat, this deals less damage than the stock fists and also drains your health. I'm not even sure what this weapon wants to be, but being good sure isn't it. In TC2, the Eviction Notice still fires 40% faster, but grants a 6-second movement speed bonus on kill and also deploys 60% faster. The damage penalty was also changed to 20%, making it deal 52 damage instead of 26. What's nice about this change is that it isn't trying to be the Gru and a damage melee at the same time anymore. You're clearly supposed to use this as a finisher for Fat Scout with the faster deploy speed and serviceable damage, or as a gap closer for melee Heavy with the speed boost, even if it's not the most noticeable. It's a meme weapon like the KGB, but one that does alright, and I think that's fine. And ending the melees is the Warrior Spirit, under the same name as TC2. In TF2, the Warrior Spirit brings your melee damage up to 85 and also restores 50 health on kill. On the downside, you take 30% more damage while this weapon is out. I don't think I need to explain why dealing melee damage with the slowest class in the game without any way to close the gap isn't a great weapon design, especially since you take 30% more damage for just using this. Easily one of the worst weapons Heavy has. In TC2, the Warrior Spirit deals 71 damage and no longer restores health on kill. However, it gets 3 seconds of bleed and a 12% longer melee range. The damage vulnerability is also replaced with the 50% slower holster and deploy speed. You're given bleed and melee range to make up for your slow speed, and the downside encourages you to use this weapon instead of punishing you for pulling it out. Still situational for melee Heavy, but at least it does its job pretty well now. Well, that's everything. This is a lot shorter of a video since Heavy doesn't have many changes moving to TC2. And for a supposed mascot of the series, I don't think Brute got a good treatment. Sure, Fat Scout and Melee Heavy were given buffs, but he still feels pretty stale, but whatever, that's just my take. Thank you to Sam the Man and Charles for helping out with this video, and also thank you to you guys for waiting half a year? Yeah, anyways, bye.